Welcome to Mr. Shadow's Stories, where the darkness isn't just a time of day, it's a state of mind. I'm your host, and tonight we're stepping into the fluorescent-lit world of 24-hour diners, where the coffee's always hot, the graveyard shift never ends, and sometimes the customers aren't entirely human. These are 4 true horror stories from night shift diner workers who learn that serving the public after midnight means serving things that shouldn't exist. So grab your coffee, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't look away from the screen. Because in the shadows between midnight and dawn, anything can walk through that diner door. Story 1. The Regular Who Never Aged. Story 1. The Regular Who Never Aged. Our first story comes from Marcus, a former night shift cook at a truck stop diner just off Interstate 40 in Tennessee. Marcus worked the overnight shift for 7 years, and he thought he'd seen everything. Drunk truckers, wandering insomniacs, even the occasional celebrity passing through. But nothing prepared him for the man in booth 7. It started innocently enough. Around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in October 2019, an older gentleman walked in. Marcus noticed him immediately because the man was impeccably dressed. Navy suit, polished shoes, silver watch that caught the light. This wasn't typical truck stop attire. The man sat in booth 7, the one by the window that overlooked the empty parking lot, and he ordered the same thing every time. Black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast. No butter, no jam, just plain toast. Now here's where it gets strange. The man came in every Tuesday night at exactly 2 a.m. Marcus could set his watch by it. The door would chime, and there he'd be. Same booth, same order, same polite nod to the waitress. He'd eat slowly, methodically, never pulling out a phone, never reading anything, just eating and staring out that window into the darkness. 3 months passed. The man never missed a Tuesday, never altered his routine. And here's the thing that started bothering Marcus. The man never aged. Not a day. Same smooth skin, same dark hair with just a touch of gray at the temples, same perfectly pressed suit. In a job where you watch regulars deteriorate from late nights and bad habits, this man looked like he'd stepped out of a photograph week after week. Marcus mentioned it to Rebecca, the overnight waitress. She laughed it off at first, but then she started paying attention too. She noticed other things. The man never made small talk. When she'd ask how he was doing, he'd smile, this thin, practiced smile, and say, "Another night, another chance." That was it. Every single time. The same inflection, the same words. One Tuesday in January, Rebecca decided to test something. She asked him what he did for work. The man paused, fork halfway to his mouth, and for just a second, his smile faltered. Then it snapped back into place, and he said, "I'm between opportunities." That was all she got. But it was what happened next that made Marcus's blood run cold. Rebecca came back to the kitchen and told Marcus what the man had said. They were both standing at the service window when they looked back out at booth 7. The man was staring directly at them, not glancing, not casually looking their way, staring, with eyes that seemed too dark, too deep, like they absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd been watching this man for months, but he'd never been watched back, not like this. The man held their gaze for what felt like an eternity, then slowly went back to his eggs as if nothing had happened.
Next Tuesday, Marcus has the night off. He'd switched shifts with another cook because his daughter had a school event. When he came back to work on Wednesday, Rebecca pulled him aside before he could even clock in. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "He came in last night," she whispered, "but you weren't here." "So?" Marcus said. "He comes in every Tuesday." "No, you don't understand," Rebecca said, her voice cracking. "He asked for you, by name. Marcus, we never told him your name. I never mentioned you. The name tags we wear don't have our real names, so how did he know?" Marcus felt ice creep down his spine. He'd never interacted with the man, never served him, never spoken to him. He was always in the kitchen, just watching. "What did you tell him?" asked Marcus. "I said you weren't working, and Marcus," he smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was like his face was doing what it thought a smile should look like, but there was nothing behind it. And he said, "Tell Marcus I'll see him soon. We have unfinished business from a long time ago." Marcus had never met this man before working at the diner. He was certain of it. There was no unfinished business, no shared history, nothing. He wanted to believe Rebecca was messing with him, but he could see the genuine fear in her eyes. That night, Marcus couldn't concentrate on work. Every time the door chimed, he jumped. Every shadow in his peripheral vision made his heart race. But the man didn't come in. Not that night, not the next Tuesday either. In fact, the man never came back at all. Marcus worked at that diner for another year before he quit and moved to a different state. He never saw the man again. But sometimes, late at night when he can't sleep, he pulls up old newspapers from the area. He searches for missing persons, unsolved murders, anything that might explain who that man was. And one night, he found something. A newspaper article from 1952. A diner in the same location, before the truck stop was built, before the interstate even existed, had burned down. 5 people died. The article included a photo of the owner standing in front of the ruins. The owner was the man in booth 7. Same face, same dark eyes, same thin smile. The caption read, "Owner Harold Perkins surveys the damage." Perkins was the only survivor of the Tuesday night fire that claimed 5 lives. Marcus doesn't work night shifts anymore. Story 2. The Order That Never Came. Our second story comes from a woman named Jennifer who worked at a small-town diner in rural Montana. This wasn't a truck stop or a highway diner. This was a local place that stayed open 24 hours, mostly out of tradition. After midnight, you'd maybe see 1 or 2 customers. It was the kind of job where you spent more time cleaning than serving. Jennifer had been working there for about 6 months when the calls started. The first one came in at 3:33 a.m. on a Wednesday. The phone rang, and Jennifer answered like she always did. "Rosie's Diner, how can I help you?" There was breathing on the other end, heavy, labored breathing, as if someone had just run a marathon. Jennifer waited, thinking maybe it was a prank call from some bored teenagers. Then a voice, raspy, strained, said, "I'd like to place an order for pickup." "Sure," Jennifer said, grabbing her pen. "What would you like?" "A cheeseburger, medium rare, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Can I get a name for the order?" The line went dead. Jennifer stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to her ear, wondering if she should make the food or not. The caller had sounded off, not just the raspy voice, but something about the way they spoke, too slow, too deliberate, like they were remembering how to form words. She decided to make the order anyway. Better to have food ready than to have an angry customer show up. She cooked the burger, made the fries, and prepared the milkshake. Everything was bagged and ready at the counter by the time 15 minutes had passed. but no one came. Jennifer waited another 15 minutes, then 30, then an hour. The food sat there, getting cold. Finally, at 5 a.m., when her shift ended, she threw it away and went home. The next night, the same thing happened. 3:33 a.m. The phone rang, the same heavy breathing, the same raspy voice, the same order. "I'll be there in 15 minutes." This time, Jennifer didn't make the food. She waited by the phone after hanging up, watching the clock. 15 minutes passed, 30. No one came. The door never opened. This continued for a week. Every single night at exactly 3:33 a.m., the phone would ring. The voice would order the same meal, promise to arrive in 15 minutes, and never show up.
Jennifer mentioned it to her manager, a man named Dale who'd owned the diner for 30 years. His face went white when she told him about the calls. "What's the order?" he asked quietly. "Cheeseburger, medium rare, fries, chocolate milkshake," Jennifer said. Dale closed his eyes and leaned against the counter. When he opened them, he looked older, tired. "That was Tommy Reardon's order," Dale said. "He called it in every Wednesday night for years, always at 3:30, always picked it up 15 minutes later on his way home from the mill, never missed a week." "Okay," Jennifer said slowly. "So where is he now?" "He's dead," Dale said. "Died 3 years ago. Car accident on Route 12. He called in his order at 3:30 like always, crashed at 3:42. Never made it here. The coroner said he died instantly at 3:43. Jennifer felt her skin crawl. The calls were coming at 3:33, exactly 10 minutes before Tommy had died. "But that's impossible," Jennifer said. "I've been getting these calls every night." "Not every night," Dale corrected. "Wednesdays. Tommy only ordered on Wednesdays." Jennifer checked her phone. Today was Wednesday. That night, Jennifer told Dale she wasn't working the shift. She couldn't. Dale understood. He worked it himself, and Jennifer went home. But she couldn't sleep. At 3:33 a.m., she lay in bed, staring at her ceiling, wondering if the phone at the diner was ringing. The next morning, she called Dale. "Did the phone ring?" There was a long pause. "Yeah," Dale said quietly. "It rang. I didn't answer." "What happened?" "After about 6 rings, it stopped. And then," Dale's voice cracked, "then I heard the door chime, like someone had walked in. But Jennifer, I was staring right at that door. Nothing opened, nothing came in, but I heard footsteps. I heard them walk across the diner. I heard the stool at the counter creak like someone sat down. And then, nothing. After about 10 minutes, I heard the stool creak again, heard footsteps walk back to the door, heard the door chime, and it was over." Jennifer quit that night. Dale closed the diner for renovations a month later. It never reopened as a 24-hour establishment again. They stop service at 10 p.m. now. But people who live in the area say that if you drive past the old diner at 3:43 a.m. on a Wednesday, you can sometimes see a figure standing in the parking lot. Just standing there, holding what looks like a paper bag, staring at the darkened windows, waiting for an order that never came. Story 3: The Woman in the Rain.
Where a man named David worked the graveyard shift at a diner near the waterfront. Portland's known for rain, and working overnight in the Pacific Northwest means you get used to the sound of water hitting windows, the hiss of wet tires on asphalt, the gloom that seems to seep into everything. David had been working at the diner for 2 years when he met the woman in the rain. It was a particularly brutal storm in November, the kind where the rain doesn't fall, it attacks. Wind howled, Power lines swayed. Most people had enough sense to stay home. But at 1:17 a.m., the door opened and she walked in. She was soaked, not just wet, but absolutely drenched, like she'd been standing in the storm for hours. Water pooled around her feet. Her long, dark hair was plastered to her face. Her clothes, a simple blue dress, clung to her frame. She was shivering violently. David immediately grabbed towels from behind the counter. "Jesus, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" The woman didn't respond. She just walked to a booth and sat down, leaving a trail of water behind her. David brought the towels over, but she didn't take them. She just stared at the menu, water dripping from her hair onto the laminated pages. "What can I get you?" David asked gently, thinking maybe she was in shock. "Hot chocolate," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. David made the best hot chocolate he could, extra marshmallows, whipped cream, the works. He brought it to her table and set it down. She wrapped her pale, pruned fingers around the mug, but didn't drink it. She just held it, staring at the steam rising. "Is there someone I can call? Family? Friends?" "He's waiting for me," she said, still staring at the mug. "Out there, in the rain." David glanced toward the windows. The parking lot was empty except for his car and the rain. "Who's waiting for you?" "I can't remember his name," she said, and a tear rolled down her cheek, mixing with the rainwater. "I can't remember anything except the rain and the cold and knowing he's out there." David felt his chest tighten. This woman needed help, real help, beyond hot chocolate and towels. "Let me call the police. They can help you." The moment he said police, the woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide and brown and filled with something David could only describe as terror, locked onto his. "No, no police. I just need to get warm. Then I'll go back out. He's waiting." David nodded slowly, backing away. He went to the phone behind the counter and quietly called the non-emergency line anyway, explaining the situation. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to check on her. But when David hung up and looked back at the booth, the woman was gone. The mug of hot chocolate sat there, still steaming, still untouched, but the woman had vanished. David rushed to the booth. The seat was dry, completely dry. The floor around it is bone dry. No puddles, no wet footprints, no sign she'd ever been there at all, except for that untouched mug. His hands shaking, David went to check the bathroom. Empty. He checked the entire diner. She was nowhere. And when he looked outside, the rain was falling just as hard, the parking lot just as empty. The police arrived 20 minutes later. David explained what happened, expecting them to think he was crazy. But when David mentioned the woman in the blue dress, one of the officers, an older man named Patterson, went pale. "What did she look like?" Patterson asked. David described her, the dark hair, the blue dress, the way she talked about someone waiting in the rain. Patterson exchanged a look with his partner. "How long have you worked here?" 2 years, David said. "Then you wouldn't know," Patterson said quietly. "About 15 years ago, there was an accident right out there in that parking lot. A young woman was waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up after her shift at this very diner. It was raining just like tonight. She was standing by the curb when a car hydroplaned and hit her, killed her instantly." David felt his blood turn to ice. What was she wearing? According to the reports, a blue dress. She was supposed to go to a birthday party after work. Her boyfriend was late picking her up. By the time he arrived, she was already gone. David never saw the woman again. But every time there's a bad rainstorm, employees at that diner report the same thing. a feeling of being watched from the parking lot, the sound of the door chime when no one's there, and sometimes, on the very worst nights, a mug of hot chocolate is left at an empty booth, still steaming, still untouched, still waiting.
Story 4: The Smiling Man. Our final story is perhaps the most disturbing, and it comes from a woman named Cassie who worked at a highway diner in Nevada. The Nevada desert at night is a special kind of darkness. No ambient light, no city glow, just an endless black void, interrupted only by the occasional pair of headlights. Cassie had been working the overnight shift for about 8 months, and she'd gotten used to the isolation, the quiet, the strange mix of truckers and insomniacs who drifted through. But one night in July changed everything. It was 4 a.m. Cassie was wiping down tables when she noticed him through the window. A man, standing at the far edge of the parking lot, just beyond the reach of the diner's lights. He was completely still, facing the building, facing her. Cassie felt uneasy, but she tried to brush it off. Maybe his car broke down. Maybe he was waiting for someone. She went back to cleaning, but every time she glanced up, he was still there. Same position, same stillness. After about 10 minutes, the man started walking toward the diner. Not a normal walk. Something was off about his gait. Too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding across the asphalt. The door opened and he walked in. That's when Cassie saw his face. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile or a polite customer service smile. This was a wide, stretched smile that showed too many teeth. His eyes were open too wide, like he was forcing them to stay that way. "Good morning," he said, his voice perfectly pleasant despite the unsettling expression. "Quite a beautiful night, isn't it?" "Can I help you?" Cassie asked, her hand drifting toward the phone. "Just coffee," the man said, still smiling. "Black, and I'd like to sit right there." He pointed to the booth directly in front of the counter, the one where Cassie would have no choice but to look at him. Cassie poured the coffee with shaking hands. When she brought it over, the man was sitting perfectly straight, hands folded on the table, that smile never wavering. "Here you go," Cassie said, setting down the cup and trying to back away quickly. "Wait," the man said, and Cassie froze. "Do you know what time it is?" 4:08, Cassie said, glancing at the clock. "Perfect. Do you know what happens at 4:44? Cassie's heart was pounding now. "No." "The veil is thinnest then," the man said, his smile somehow growing wider. "That's when we can cross over. That's when we can be seen for what we really are." I need to check on something in the kitchen," Cassie stammered. "You have 36 minutes, the man said, never breaking eye contact. 36 minutes until 4:44. I'll wait." Cassie practically ran to the kitchen. She grabbed her phone and called the police, whispering frantically about a threatening customer. The dispatcher said they'd send someone, but the nearest patrol was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. She had to survive 20 minutes with this man. Cassie grabbed a knife from the kitchen, just in case, and positioned herself where she could watch the man through the service window. He hadn't moved, hadn't touched his coffee, hadn't stopped smiling. The clock ticked. 4:15, 4:20, 4:25.
At 4:30, the man spoke again, though Cassie was in the kitchen. His voice carried clearly, impossibly loud for the distance. 14 minutes, Cassie. He knew her name. The name tag she wore said Candy, a fake name all the overnight staff used for safety, but he knew her real name. At 4:35, he spoke again. 9 minutes. Can you feel it? The air is changing. Cassie was crying now, knife gripped in her hand, praying the police would arrive. She looked at the clock. 4:40. 4 minutes until whatever the man said would happen. At 4:43, the man stood up. The smile was gone. His face was completely blank, expressionless, like a mannequin. He turned toward the door. 1 minute, he said, flatly. I won't be here when it happens, but others will. They're already waiting outside. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the darkness. Cassie watched through the window as he walked back to the edge of the parking lot, back to that spot just beyond the lights. And then she saw them, figures, dozens of them, standing in a circle around the diner, just beyond the reach of the lights, all perfectly still, all facing the building. The clock hit 4:44. Every light in the diner went out. Complete darkness. Cassie screamed, stumbling backward, the knife clattering from her hand. She could hear breathing, not her own, breathing all around her, close, like there were people standing inches away in the dark. Then, just as suddenly, the lights came back on. The diner was empty. Cassie spun around, looking everywhere. Nothing. No figures outside. No man at the booth. Nothing except a coffee cup, still full, sitting where the man had been. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They found Cassie sobbing on the floor. They checked the security cameras. The footage showed Cassie entering the diner at the start of her shift, cleaning tables, and then suddenly dropping to the floor at 4:44 a.m. The cameras showed no man, no figures, no customers at all. But when they checked the coffee cup, it was ice cold. It had been sitting there for hours. Cassie quit that night. She's never worked a night shift again. She refuses to be awake at 4:44 a.m. She sets alarms to make sure she's asleep by 4:30 and doesn't wake until after 5, because she knows what she saw. She knows what happened, and she knows that at 4:44 a.m., when the veil is thinnest, things are waiting in the darkness. Things that smile too widely, things that know your name. 4 stories, 4 night shifts, 4 encounters with something that shouldn't exist. These are the tales that diner workers whisper about when the sun goes down and the graveyard shift begins. Because when you work overnight, you learn that the world isn't the same after midnight. Rules change, reality bends, and sometimes the customers aren't customers at all. If you enjoyed these true horror stories from the darkness, make sure you subscribe to Mr. Shadow's Stories. Hit that notification bell, because every week we bring you real encounters with the unexplainable, the terrifying, and the impossible. Leave a comment below if you've ever worked a night shift and experienced something you couldn't explain. Your story might be featured in our next video. And remember, the next time you walk into a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m., look closely at the other customers. Really look, because in the fluorescent light and the smell of coffee, among the truckers and the insomniacs, there might be something else. Something that's been waiting in booth 7. Something that was placed on order will never be picked up. Something that walks in from the rain. Something that knows exactly what time it is. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and whatever you do, don't trust a smile that shows too many teeth. This is Mr. Shadow's Stories, reminding you that the darkness is always watching, and sometimes it's hungry.